If you look at the financial headlines right now, I mean, they are screaming that the housing market is this, impenetrable fortress.
Right.
They're telling you that bidding wars are back, inventory is tight, and prices are up nationwide. But buried inside this brand new data set, and this covers 195 U.S. metropolitan areas, there is a massive, incredibly expensive secret.
And it's one that really changes the whole picture.
Exactly. Because in nearly 1 out of every 3 major markets, that's 62 different cities, by the way, home values aren't just stalling out. They're actively falling compared to last year.
It completely shatters the narrative, doesn't it? I mean, when you read those national headlines, you might feel a tremendous amount of anxiety. Right?
Oh, yeah. Like the train is leaving the station without you.
Exactly. You think the market is running away from you again. But this new research brief from PixbyProperty.com, which parses through the May 2026 Zillow research data, it reveals how dangerous those broad national averages can actually be.
Because it's not a national average when you're actually buying a house.
Right. Depending on where your feet are planted, the reality on the ground is drastically different. It's not a crash, but it is a very crucial correction.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the mission of our deep dives today is to really explore the mechanics behind those 62 declining markets. And looking at the top 10 cities where prices are dropping the fastest, the data tells 2 entirely distinct stories.
Yeah. Very different stories.
So let's start with the first one, which is essentially the deflation of the pandemic boomtowns.
Right. So we are seeing a profound economic hangover in the places where remote work absolutely supercharged the market.
Like Austin.
Yes, Austin, Texas. It sits at number 3 on the list of fastest declining markets. Values there are down 6.0% year over year.
Wow, 6%.
Yeah, and homes are sitting for an average of 49 days. To understand the mechanics of this drop, we have to look at how supply chains react to sudden demand. I mean, have you ever heard of the bullwhip effect?
In retail, sure. Like someone buys a little extra toilet paper, the store orders double, the distributor orders quadruple, and suddenly, a warehouse is overflowing with toilet paper a year after anyone actually needed it.
That's the one.
But wait, are you saying that is happening with actual houses?
That is exactly the mechanism at play here. During the pandemic, Austin added major tech employers and became, the darling of the remote work migration.
Right, everyone was moving there.
Demand spiked instantly. Builders saw lines of buyers wrapping around the block in 2021 and 2022, so they pulled permits to build thousands of new homes. But building a subdivision isn't like restocking a grocery shelf.
It takes time.
It takes years. You have to buy the land, get the permits, secure the materials, pour the concrete.
And while those houses were half-built, the entire macroeconomic landscape just shifted.
Precisely. The tech pullback happened. Meta and Google cut headcount.
Oh, right, the layoffs.
Right, and strict return-to-office policies were enacted, meaning that flood of remote workers suddenly slowed to a trickle. But the builders, they couldn't just stop.
Because they've already poured the foundations.
And they have loans from the bank, right. They had to finish those houses and sell them. So in 2025 and 2026, all that delayed supply finally hits the market, creating this massive surplus of homes competing for a rapidly shrinking buyer pool.
Jeez. I'm looking at Dallas, Texas, sitting at number 6 on the list, and it's down 3.5%. It feels like the exact same story. Like, is Texas just dealing with a statewide overreaction from builders?
Well, I would actually argue Dallas is a slightly different animal than Austin.
Really? How so?
While Austin heavily relied on that remote worker narrative, Dallas was the ultimate destination for massive corporate relocations. Companies physically moved their headquarters there.
Right, Toyota, all those big companies.
Exactly. So the demand didn't just vanish into thin air like a tech worker returning to Silicon Valley.
Then why are prices dropping 3.5%?
Because the sheer volume of construction simply outpaced human population growth. I mean, Texas has one of the least restrictive, most active builder markets in the country.
They just build and build.
Right. Even with corporations moving in, the builders laid down so much new concrete that they oversaturated their own market. The people who wanted or needed to move to Dallas, they already have. The music slowed down, but the builders are still, putting new chairs out on the dance floor.
That's a great way to put it. But that dynamic of oversupply, it isn't just isolated to Texas, though. Because I am looking at Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yes, Raleigh.
It's sitting at number 9 on the list, down 2.3%. But the number that jumps off the page to me is their inventory. The data shows Raleigh's inventory, meaning the total number of homes actively sitting on the market waiting for a buyer, is up a massive 25.6% year over year.
It's huge.
That is the largest inventory jump in the entire top 10.
Yeah, well, Raleigh is a perfect case study in how a great narrative can ultimately overheat a market. They boomed on the Research Triangle story.
Right? Great schools, tech jobs.
Exactly. You have fantastic universities, a growing tech presence, and it was significantly cheaper than living in Boston or San Francisco. So investors and builders rushed in to capitalize on that narrative.
Makes sense.
But when inventory spikes by 26% in a single year, you enter this fierce hyper-competition among sellers. When you have 5 similar houses on the exact same street for sale, the only lever a seller has left to pull is price reduction.
So Texas and North Carolina are basically drowning in delayed builder supply. But what happens to a market where a surplus of new homes isn't the primary issue, but the buyers themselves simply hit like a mathematical wall?
Oh, you're talking about Phoenix.
Yeah, because that brings us to Phoenix, Arizona at number 10.
Phoenix is a fascinating study in financial friction.
Let's look at the numbers. Values in Phoenix are only down 1.8% year over year, which, doesn't sound catastrophic. But a staggering 33.8% of active listings had a price cut.
1 out of 3.
1 out of every 3 sellers is actively slashing their asking price just to get someone in the door.
And that price slashing isn't happening because the buyers suddenly decided they don't like the weather in Phoenix.
Right.
It's happening because of a hard physical barrier in the mortgage industry called the debt-to-income ratio, or DTI.
Break that down mechanically for us. How does that ratio force a seller to drop their price?
Well, by law, banks will not approve a mortgage if the monthly payment pushes a buyer past a certain percentage of their gross monthly income. Usually, that absolute ceiling is around 43 to 45%.
Okay, so it's a hard cap.
Exactly. So back in 2021, when mortgage rates were sitting in the 3% range, a typical family earning a median income in Phoenix could easily secure a loan for a $480,000 house without breaching that ratio.
But when rates jumped up to 7% or higher?
The monthly payment on that exact same $480,000 house skyrocketed by hundreds, sometimes over $1,000 a month.
Oh, wow. So they just can't afford it.
Mathematically, no. That same median income family fails the debt-to-income test. The bank literally rejects them. So the buyer pool for a $500,000 home evaporates overnight.
So the sellers lose all their leverage.
The leverage completely flips. That 33.8% price cut rate, that is the sound of sellers realizing they cannot sell a house to a buyer whose bank has locked them out. They are forced to lower the price until the monthly payment fits back inside the buyer's DTI ratio.
That makes total sense. But if Phoenix is a story about the DTI wall forcing sellers to slowly slash prices, how do we explain a market where prices are dropping, but homes are selling incredibly fast?
It's a great question.
Because I'm looking at Denver, Colorado at number 8, and it feels like a total contradiction.
Denver is really interesting.
Yeah, like prices are down 3.1%, 28% of sellers are making price cuts, but homes are only sitting on the market for an average of 14 days.
What's fascinating here is how beautifully that contradiction illustrates peak affordability.
Wait, Denver homes are selling in just 2 weeks, but prices are dropping. That feels like a store having a massive clearance sale where everything flies off the shelves, but the manager's still complaining that revenue is down.
That's a fun way to picture it.
Are sellers just finally waking up and accepting lower offers?
Well, it is less of a clearance sale and more of a strict toll booth. The median home value in Denver right now is $575,130.
Okay.
Buyers are there. They are waiting in their cars. But the bank's interest rates have set the toll at exactly that median threshold. If a seller lists their house at $590,000, hoping to capture the glory days of 2022,
The gate doesn't open.
the toll booth gate simply does not open. Nobody drives through. The house sits, it gets stale, and eventually the seller is forced to become part of that 28%, making a price cut.
But what if they price it right at the toll booth limit?
If they drop the price to match the absolute maximum the current buyer pool can afford, let's say $570,000, the gate swings open, 10 cars rush through at once, and the house sells in 14 days.
Ah, so that's why they sell so fast.
Exactly. They get multiple offers immediately because buyers have been waiting on the sidelines for anything they can actually afford. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to remember Denver's history.
Right, it had a huge run-up.
Massive.
Mm.
Values there rose over 70% between 2018 and 2022. A 3% drop is barely a rounding error compared to that massive run-up, but it serves as a critical signal to the market. The absolute ceiling of human affordability has been found.
Okay, so that covers the first major theme of this research brief. We have these pandemic boomtowns, Austin, Dallas, Raleigh, Phoenix, Denver, that are essentially suffering from an economic hangover.
Mm.
It's this mix of the bullwhip effect in builder supply, corporate shifts, and mortgage rates hitting that DTI wall. But as we move down the list to the markets dropping the fastest, the underlying problem completely shifts, doesn't it?
It does. We move entirely away from the macroeconomic forces of tech jobs and remote work, and we dive headfirst into a hyper-localized, risk-based crisis.
We are talking about Florida. And looking at this data, the situation sounds incredibly expensive and honestly quite terrifying if you're a homeowner holding the bag.
It's a very stressful situation for a lot of people down there.
Let's look at Miami at number 7, down 3.5%, and Tampa at number 5, down 3.8%. For years, Miami was sold as this bulletproof market.
Oh, completely bulletproof.
Right. It was supposed to be completely immune to any national housing correction because of international wealth. Condo towers were famously selling out before they even broke ground.
That was the dominant narrative for a decade. But the Pixby property brief shows that homes in Miami are now sitting for 56 days on average.
Almost 2 months.
Almost 2 months. The international buyers haven't vanished, but the era of blind bidding is over. They are applying strict risk calculus to their investments. Furthermore, the domestic buyers, the New Yorkers who moved down during the pandemic seeking looser restrictions, they are in many cases retreating back north or moving to the Carolinas.
And if you're sitting in the Midwest right now, looking at Zillow listings
Yeah.
in Tampa and thinking, hey, a 3.8% drop, maybe it's finally time to buy that retirement home, the data is screaming at you to pause.
Absolute pause.
Because Tampa was constantly ranked as one of the hottest markets in the country.
Yeah.
Because of affordability, good weather, no state income tax. But the narrative has completely inverted.
It has inverted entirely due to the change in climate and the resulting insurance shockwave.
The insurance issue is huge.
It's not just about the physical threat of a hurricane making landfall anymore. It is the financial devastation that follows. Major national insurance carriers have fled the state of Florida completely.
They just packed up and left.
They did. And the carriers that stuck around have raised their premiums astronomically to cover their increased risk pools. You can no longer look at a home in Tampa, calculate the mortgage payment, and assume you know what it costs to live there.
Which brings us to the hardest hit markets on the entire list. Northport and Cape Coral, Florida. Northport is number 2, down 6.7%.
Right?
This specific area was devastated by Hurricane Ian. And the research brief notes that this event introduced a brand new risk calculus for everyday buyers.
It changed everything.
They aren't walking into open houses looking at the kitchen countertops anymore. They're looking at the baseboards and asking, is this living room going to be underwater in 3 years? And what will my flood insurance cost in 5?
The underlying risk story fundamentally changed the psychology of the buyer. But Cape Coral, which sits at the absolute top of the list at number 1, is where we see the financial mechanics completely break down.
Yeah, Cape Coral values are down a staggering 8.1% in a single year, and homes are sitting for 65 days.
8.1%.
Down 8.1%. That means a home worth $370,000 last year is suddenly worth $341,000 today. That is real painful equity just vanishing into thin air. How does a market crash 8% in 12 months?
It happens when your primary buyer demographic suddenly becomes your biggest source of supply.
Wait, how does that work?
Well, during the pandemic, real estate investors aggressively bought up properties in Cape Coral. It had canals everywhere, waterfront access, and offered the classic Florida lifestyle at a fraction of the cost of places like Sarasota or Naples.
Oh, so it was a gold mine for short-term rental income.
Exactly. They were buying these up to run as Airbnbs. Let's look at the math an investor uses. They buy a property expecting $4,000 a month in rental income. Their mortgage is $2,500. Their old insurance policy was maybe $300 a month.
So they're clearing over $1,000 in positive cash flow.
Right. But then the insurance shock hits. their property insurance jumps from $300 a month to $1,500 a month. Suddenly, their positive cash flow turns deeply negative. They are bleeding cash every single month they hold the property.
And because thousands of investors are realizing this exact same math on the exact same day,
Panic sets in. The investor community rushes to the exit. They put all those short-term rentals onto the market at the exact same time, flooding Cape Coral with inventory.
wow.
But the regular home buyers, the families who might want to live there full-time, they look at those same insane insurance quotes and realize they can't afford to buy them either. You have a massive spike in supply, a complete collapse in demand, and prices free fall by 8.1%.
That is just brutal. And you see the most extreme, almost absurd version of this insurance shock when you look at Naples, Florida, which is number 4 on the list, down 5.4%, sitting on the market for 70 days.
Naples is a very wealthy luxury market.
Right. We're talking about beautiful $2 million homes. But the brief points out a detail that absolutely blew my mind. Buyers looking at those luxury homes are getting quoted $40,000 to $50,000 a year just for property insurance.
It is a staggering amount of capital to burn annually, even for a high net worth household.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. For decades, moving to Florida was treated as the ultimate American life hack. You endure the humidity, but you get the sunshine, and you avoid the state income tax. It felt like free money.
That was the dream.
But based on this data, it sounds like the sunshine tax has essentially been replaced by an unavoidable insurance tax. I mean, a $50,000 annual insurance bill isn't just a fee. That is like being forced to buy a brand new luxury car every single year, handing the keys over to an insurance agent and walking away, just for the privilege of keeping your house protected.
It sounds absurd when you frame it that way, but mathematically, you are entirely correct. What you are describing is a fundamental shift in the true cost of ownership. Real estate is no longer just about the sticker price of the house or the principal and interest on the mortgage. The market is aggressively correcting for the hidden, recurring, non-negotiable costs.
The PITI principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, plus the HOAs.
Exactly. When you factor in skyrocketing property insurance, required standalone flood coverage, and rising homeowner association fees, which are spiking because the communities themselves can't afford their master insurance policies, it completely breaks the math.
It's domino effect.
It breaks it for the luxury buyer in Naples who refuses to burn $50,000 a year for no return, and it breaks it for the short-term rental investor in Cape Coral who is now losing money every time a guest checks in.
So what does this all mean? Especially for you, the listener, who might be trying to navigate this incredibly wild, contradictory market where the national headline says prices are up, but your local neighborhood might be quietly depreciating.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Pixby Property Brief distills this down to some very stark, actionable realities for both sides of the transaction.
Okay, let's start with the buyers.
Right. If you are a buyer, you have likely felt defeated, outbid, and exhausted for the last 3 years. But if you are looking in one of these 62 declining markets, and especially in these top 10 cities, this environment offers you something incredibly rare: leverage.
Define leverage practically for someone walking into an open house this weekend. Like, what does that actually look like?
It means you no longer have to waive your right to a home inspection just to get your offer looked at.
That's a huge relief.
It means you don't have to bid $50,000 over the asking price and drain your retirement account to cover an appraisal gap. Because inventory is up and homes are sitting on the market longer, you actually have the power to negotiate.
Because the sellers are motivated?
Highly motivated. Their holding costs the property taxes, the high-interest mortgage payments, and the maintenance are bleeding them dry every month. The house sits empty. You can ask for seller concessions. You can ask them to buy down your interest rate.
But I'm looking at this from a seller's perspective, though, and it feels paralyzing. If I live in one of these 62 metros, say I live in Austin or Tampa, do I pull my listing off the market and wait it out for a year, or do I just take the 6% haircut today?
Well, for sellers, this data is a harsh but necessary reality check. The glorious, record-breaking comparable sales, the comps from 2022 that you saw your neighbor get, they are dead and gone.
Well, just dead and gone.
They are completely irrelevant to today's buyer who is calculating their budget based on 7% interest rates and double the insurance costs. If you want to actually sell your house, you cannot price it based on yesterday's euphoria.
Because if you do, it just sits there.
It sits, it rots on the market, your holding costs accumulate, and the listing becomes stale. Buyers start to wonder what is physically wrong with the property.
Oh yeah, the stigma of days on market.
Exactly. Pricing a home to move today means accepting the current, localized market reality. As we saw in the Denver data, if you swallow your pride and price perfectly to meet the buyer's strict affordability threshold, you can still sell your house in 2 weeks. If you hold out for 2022 pricing, you will sit on the market for 60 days and end up slashing your price anyway.
We have covered so much ground today. I mean, we started by looking at those complex economic hangovers in places like Austin, Dallas, and Denver, where a massive delayed supply of new builder homes collided head-on with a buyer pool that was suddenly locked out by the DTI limits of modern mortgage rates.
Right.
And then we pivoted to the absolute insurance crisis reshaping the Florida coast, turning former investor paradises like Cape Coral into cautionary tales about the true cost of ownership.
It really highlights a profound shift in how we need to analyze real estate going forward. The research brief concludes with a very poignant thought. The difference between a good decision and a bad one right now is knowing which market you are actually in.
I love that.
And building on that data, I think there is a vital, somewhat provocative question you need to ask yourself as you navigate your own housing journey.
What's the question?
If nearly a third of all U.S. markets are currently declining due to highly specific, hyper-local factors like a delayed builder pipeline in Texas, or a localized hurricane insurance crisis in Florida, or strict toll booth pricing in Colorado, does the concept of a unified national housing market even exist anymore?
Oh, wow.
Or have we officially entered an era of hyper-localized real estate microeconomies? Because if your local street is governed entirely by its own unique microeconomic weather system, then making a financial decision based on screaming national headlines about bidding wars might actually be the most dangerous thing a buyer or seller could do.
That is exactly the kind of perspective shift we're always looking for on this deep dive. You are not buying the national average. You are buying a specific street in a specific town with a very specific hyper-local risk profile. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the housing data. We love untangling these complex stories and finding the actual mechanics underneath the headlines. Keep your eyes open, run your own local math, and we will catch you on the next.